Imagine being forced to live with a warrior your people fear, only to discover that the greatest danger isn't him, but what the world around you is becoming. What if the man you once saw as an enemy becomes the only one willing to risk everything for your child? Thank you so much for watching, and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you like the story, and where you're watching from, and why you're following this. Montana Territory, 1876. Sarah Miller gazed across the vast plains, her heart as heavy as the darkening skies above. At 24, she had already endured more hardship than most would in a lifetime. The small wagon train had been traveling west for weeks, but now smoke billowed from the direction of their camp. "Thomas, keep low," Sarah whispered urgently to her 5-year-old son, pulling him beneath a rocky outcropping. They had wandered away to collect berries when the attack began. Now they could only hide and pray. Screams echoed across the valley as Sarah held Thomas close, his small body trembling against hers. "Mama, I'm scared," he whimpered. "Shh, my brave boy. Remember what Papa used to say? We're Millers, and Millers never give up," she soothed, though her own voice quivered. Her husband James had died of fever 2 months earlier, leaving her to continue the journey to Oregon alone with their son. When silence finally fell over the prairie, Sarah knew she couldn't stay hidden forever. "Thomas, we need to see if anyone survived. Stay right behind me." They crept cautiously toward the camp. The wagons were destroyed, supplies scattered, and bodies lay motionless on the ground. Sarah recognized every face, families who had become friends over their long journey. "Mrs. Harrison? Mr. Cooper?" Sarah called softly, but received no response. Her heart sank as the horrific reality settled in. They were the only survivors. "Mama, what will we do now?" Thomas asked, his blue eyes wide with fear. Before Sarah could answer, the thunder of approaching hooves made her blood run cold. She pushed Thomas behind her as warriors from the Crow tribe surrounded them, their faces painted for war. A tall warrior with a scar across his right cheek dismounted, regarding Sarah with cold, calculating eyes. Unlike the others, he wore a necklace of bear claws and eagle feathers in his hair, marking him as someone of importance. "Please," Sarah begged. "My son, he's just a child." The warrior spoke in his native tongue to the others. Though Sarah couldn't understand the words, the meaning became clear when they seized her and Thomas, binding their hands. "No, let go of my son!" Sarah fought desperately as they separated them, but a sharp blow to her temple sent her world spinning into darkness. When Sarah regained consciousness, she found herself in a Crow encampment. Her head throbbed as she sat up, frantically searching for Thomas. "Thomas, where's my son?" she cried out, only to be restrained by a Crow woman who pushed her back down onto a bed of furs. The older woman spoke in broken English. "You rest, boy safe." "Where is he? Please, I need to see him," Sarah pleaded. "Black Wolf takes boy." "You belong to Raven now," the woman explained, pointing to a large teepee across the encampment. "Raven? Who is Raven?" Sarah asked, her voice breaking. As if summoned by her question, the scarred warrior who had captured them entered the teepee. Up close, Sarah could see his features more clearly. Strong jawline, piercing dark eyes, and that distinctive scar that cut from his temple to his jaw. "I am Raven," he stated in surprisingly good English. "Your people killed my brother last winter. Now you serve my family." Sarah stood on shaky legs. "My name is Sarah Miller. I've done nothing to your people. Where is my son?" Raven's expression remained impassive. "The boy stays with Black Wolf's family. They lost a son to your people's disease." "You can't separate us. He needs his mother," Sarah argued, stepping toward him despite her fear. Raven's hand shot out, gripping her arm painfully. "You are alive because I claimed you. Others wanted your scalp. Remember that, Sarah Miller." As days turned into weeks, Sarah learned to navigate life in the Crow camp. She was given tasks, preparing hides, cooking, gathering water, always under watchful eyes. Raven's mother, an elderly woman named Morning Star, seemed to take a peculiar interest in Sarah, teaching her their ways with stern patience. Every day, Sarah would catch glimpses of Thomas playing with Black Wolf's children. He seemed to be adapting, learning their language much faster than she could. It broke her heart to see him growing comfortable while they remained captives, but she was grateful he was at least unharmed. One evening, as Sarah returned from the river with water, she found Raven waiting outside his teepee. "The boy asks for you," he said gruffly. Sarah's heart leaped. "You'll let me see him?" Raven nodded once. "Black Wolf's woman says he cries at night. It disturbs their sleep." Following Raven across the camp, Sarah felt dozens of eyes tracking her movement. Many of the tribe still viewed her with open hostility. When Thomas saw her, he broke away from Black Wolf's wife and ran to Sarah, throwing his small arms around her waist. "Mama, I missed you so much." Sarah dropped to her knees, embracing him tightly as tears streamed down her face. "Oh, my sweet boy. Are you all right? Are they treating you well?" Thomas nodded, his eyes brightening. "Little Elk is teaching me to shoot a bow, and I'm learning their words too. But I miss you every night." Sarah stroked his hair, noticing it had been cut in the Crow style. "I miss you too, more than anything. But we must be strong for now, all right?" As Thomas chattered about his days, Sarah became aware of Raven watching them intently. For a brief moment, something almost like compassion flickered in his eyes. Later, walking back to Raven's teepee, Sarah gathered her courage. "Thank you for letting me see him." Raven's jaw tightened. "He is just a boy. Even enemies can show mercy to children." "We were never your enemies," Sarah said quietly. "We were simply traveling west, looking for a new home after my husband died." "All white settlers are enemies of the people," Raven replied, but his voice held less conviction than before. "Your kind take our land, kill our buffalo, bring disease." "Not all of us," Sarah countered, "just as I'm sure not all Crow are raiders." Raven's expression darkened. "You know nothing of our ways or why we fight." "Then teach me," Sarah challenged. "If I'm to live among your people, shouldn't I understand?" That night, lying awake on her pallet of furs, Sarah wondered if she had pushed too far. But as the moon rose high, she made a silent promise to Thomas. Somehow they would survive this. Somehow they would find their way back to each other and to freedom. The summer heat beat down on the Crow encampment as Sarah worked the hide of a freshly killed deer. 3 months had passed since their capture, and with each day the rhythms of tribal life became more familiar. Morning Star watched over her work with critical eyes, occasionally nodding with grudging approval. "You learn quick for a white woman," the elderly woman remarked, demonstrating how to scrape the hide more efficiently. "I had to learn many things quickly after my husband died," Sarah replied, wiping sweat from her brow. Sarah's weekly visits with Thomas had become the center of her existence. Each time she noticed how he grew more integrated into the tribe, speaking their language, wearing their clothes, even beginning to think like them. It terrified her that he might forget their old life, forget his father, forget who they truly were. "Mama, look what I made," Thomas exclaimed during their latest visit, proudly displaying a small carved horse. "White Feather showed me how." Sarah examined the carving with genuine admiration. "It's beautiful, Thomas. Your father would be so proud." Thomas's face clouded at the mention of James. Sometimes I can't remember what Papa looked like." Sarah pulled him close, fighting back tears. "He had blue eyes just like yours, and the kindest smile you've ever seen. He loved you more than anything in this world." Later that evening, as Sarah sat outside Raven's teepee mending a torn shirt, she became aware of raised voices from the center of camp. Warriors were gathering, their expressions tense. Raven emerged from a council meeting, his face set in hard lines. "What's happening?" Sarah asked as he strode past. To her surprise, he stopped. "Soldiers are camped 3 days' ride from here. They attacked a Cheyenne village to the south." Sarah's heart quickened. "American soldiers? They might be looking for survivors from our wagon train." Raven's eyes narrowed dangerously. "They kill without asking who is enemy or friend. They will not find us." "You're moving the camp," Sarah realized, watching women already beginning to dismantle teepees. "We leave at dawn." Raven hesitated, then added, "The boy comes with us." "And if I refuse?" Sarah challenged, though she knew it was futile. Raven stepped closer, his voice low. "Then you choose death for both of you." "The soldiers will not save you, Sarah Miller. They will kill any Indian they find, and any white who lives with Indians." His words chilled her. Over the months, Sarah had heard stories of massacres on both sides, atrocities committed in the name of progress or protection. The simple journey west she'd imagined with James now seemed like a child's naive dream. That night, as the camp prepared for departure, Morning Star entered the tepee with a bundle of clothing. "Wear these," she instructed, handing Sarah a crow woman's dress and moccasins. "White dress brings death if soldiers see from far." Sarah accepted the clothes, understanding the grim logic. "Thank you for the warning." Morning Star's weathered face softened slightly. "My son watches you, not just as captor. His wife, she died 2 winters past. No children came to them." Sarah absorbed this information in silence. It explained something about Raven's bitterness, perhaps, but changed nothing about their situation. "I'm sorry for his loss," she said finally, "but I cannot be what you're suggesting." "Time changes rivers and hearts," Morningstar replied cryptically before leaving. The tribe traveled for days, moving deeper into the mountains where the soldiers would be reluctant to follow. Sarah kept anxious eyes on Thomas whenever she could see him, noting how he rode comfortably with Black Wolf's family now, chattering and laughing like any crow child. On the 5th night, they made camp beside a rushing stream. Sarah was collecting firewood when she spotted Thomas wandering alone near the water's edge. "Thomas," she called softly, glancing around to ensure they weren't observed. His face lit up. "Mama!" "Listen to me carefully," Sarah whispered, kneeling beside him. "Do you remember our plan to reach Oregon, to start our new life?" Thomas nodded uncertainly. "With Papa. Papa's waiting for us in heaven now, but we still need to continue our journey," Sarah explained gently. "The soldiers nearby might help us get away." Thomas's eyes widened with alarm. "But White Feather says soldiers are bad men who kill children." Sarah's heart sank at how thoroughly he'd absorbed the tribe's perspective. "Not all of them, Thomas. Just like not all crow people are the same." Before Thomas could respond, a shadow fell over them. Sarah looked up to find Raven standing there, his expression unreadable. "Go back to Black Wolf's fire, boy," he ordered Thomas, who hesitated only briefly before obeying. Once Thomas was out of earshot, Raven seized Sarah's arm. "You plan escape? Foolish woman. The mountains in autumn kill more surely than any warrior. I'd rather die trying to give my son his freedom than live as captives forever," Sarah retorted, pulling away from his grip. Something flickered in Raven's eyes, respect, perhaps, or simple surprise at her defiance. "The boy's happy here. He learns our ways, becomes strong. What freedom waits for a woman alone with a child in your world?" The question struck deeper than Sarah wanted to admit. What did await them? No home? No money? No protection in a land that grew increasingly dangerous? "That's for us to discover," she answered finally. "It's our choice to make." Raven studied her for a long moment. "Choice. My people had that taken when your people came. Now we fight or die. Not all battles are fought with weapons," Sarah said quietly. "Sometimes survival itself is victory." Later that night, as the camp settled into sleep, Raven entered his tepee to find Sarah still awake, staring into the small fire. Without a word, he sat across from her, the flames casting shadows across his scarred face. "My brother was called Swift Arrow," he said unexpectedly. "He was a man of peace who believed we could live alongside the white settlers. He went to talk with them during the winter when food was scarce." His voice hardened. "They shot him as he approached under a flag of truce." Sarah closed her eyes, absorbing his pain. "I'm truly sorry, Raven. That was wrong. After I wanted to kill every white person I found," he continued. "But hatred is a fire that burns the one who carries it. Yet you still took us captive," Sarah pointed out. "I took you because—" He paused, searching for words. "Because when I saw you protecting your son, I remembered my mother doing the same when soldiers came to our village years ago." The admission hung between them, changing something fundamental in their relationship. No longer simply captor and captive, but two people caught in the grinding wheels of a larger conflict. "The boy needs both his people," Raven said finally. "The crow to teach him strength, and you to teach him kindness. Perhaps there is wisdom in both." As Sarah pondered his words, distant thunder rolled across the mountains. But the skies were clear. This was not nature's voice, but man's. Gunfire. Raven was on his feet instantly. "Soldiers!" he growled, reaching for his weapons. They found us. Within moments, the camp erupted into chaos. Warriors rushed to defend the perimeter, while women and children fled toward the shelter of the forest. Sarah's only thought was Thomas. She had to reach him before the fighting engulfed them all. Racing through the camp, Sarah searched desperately for Black Wolf's family. The sound of gunfire grew closer, punctuated by war cries and shouts in English. Through the confusion, she spotted Thomas being hurried toward the trees by Black Wolf's wife. "Thomas!" she screamed, running toward them. A mounted soldier appeared suddenly between them, raising his rifle. Sarah froze, certain her death had come, when an arrow struck the man's shoulder, toppling him from his horse. Raven materialized at her side, bow still in hand. "Get to the boy," he ordered. "I will hold them back." Sarah hesitated only briefly before racing toward Thomas. As she reached him, Black Wolf's wife surrendered him with a quick nod of understanding. "Come, Thomas, we must run," Sarah urged, pulling him into the protective darkness of the forest. Behind them, the battle raged on, a desperate struggle that would reshape the destiny of all who survived this night. Dawn broke over the mountains, illuminating the aftermath of violence. Sarah and Thomas huddled in a small cave, having fled through the night, guided only by the stars and Sarah's desperate instinct to put distance between them and the fighting. "Are we going home now, Mama?" Thomas whispered, his small body shivering despite the blanket Sarah had managed to grab during their escape. "Yes, my love," Sarah answered, though home had become an abstract concept. Their original destination of Oregon seemed impossibly distant now. "But what about Whitefeather and Little Elk?" Thomas asked, his brow furrowed with concern for his crow playmates. Sarah stroked his hair, at a loss for words. How could she explain the brutal realities of frontier conflicts to a child who had come to love people on both sides? "I don't know what happened to them," she admitted finally. "But we need to find a safe place for ourselves now." As morning light strengthened, Sarah ventured to the cave entrance, surveying the rugged landscape. They had no food, minimal shelter, and autumn was deepening toward winter in the mountains. "We need to find a settlement," she murmured to herself. But which direction? The soldiers might still be searching the area, and without knowing who had won the battle, every path seemed fraught with danger. Sarah was contemplating their next move when a sound outside the cave made her freeze. Someone was approaching. Retreating to Thomas, she pressed a finger to her lips, urging silence. Heavy footsteps stopped near the entrance. Then a familiar voice called out, "Sarah Miller." "Raven." "Stay here," she whispered to Thomas, then cautiously moved toward the cave mouth. Raven stood there alone, his clothing torn and bloodied. A crude bandage wrapped around his upper arm. His face was etched with exhaustion, but his eyes remained alert and watchful. "How did you find us?" Sarah asked, maintaining a cautious distance. "I am Crow. Tracking is in my blood," he replied simply. "The soldiers killed many of our people, including Black Wolf and his family." Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. "All of them?" Raven nodded grimly. "Little Elk, Whitefeather, all gone. The survivors scattered to the north." Thomas appeared behind Sarah, his eyes widening at the sight of Raven. "Are you hurt?" he asked in Crow language. Raven's expression softened slightly. "It is nothing, little warrior." "Why did you come after us?" Sarah asked, still wary of his intentions. "To warn you. The soldiers hunt for any survivors, Crow or White. They believe all whites with Indians have turned traitor." He paused, his gaze meeting hers directly. "And to help you reach safety." Sarah studied him with disbelief. "Why would you help us escape?" "The boy has lost enough," Raven answered, glancing at Thomas. "And you." He hesitated. "You showed courage few possess. My mother would say the spirits have tied our paths together for a reason." Sarah remembered Morningstar's cryptic words about rivers and hearts changing. Where is Morningstar? Did she survive? Pain flickered across Raven's face. "She stayed behind to help others escape. I do not know if she lives." The realization that he had chosen to follow them rather than search for his own mother stunned Sarah into silence. "There is a trading post 2 days' journey west," Raven continued. "From there, you can find passage to Oregon, or wherever you wish to go." "And you would just let us leave?" Sarah asked, still suspicious of his sudden change of heart. "My people's way of life is ending," Raven said, a quiet resignation in his voice. "I see this now. Fighting only brings more death. The boy deserves a chance at life. The three set out as soon as Thomas had rested, following game trails through the dense forest. Raven moved with silent efficiency, leaving almost no trail for potential pursuers. Despite his wound, he carried Thomas when the boy grew tired, showing a gentleness Sarah had never witnessed before. That evening, as Thomas slept beside their small fire, Sarah found herself studying Raven's profile in the flickering light. Without the paint of war, with his guard lowered by exhaustion, he seemed more man than enemy. "You never told me your true name," Sarah said softly. "Raven is what your people call you, but you have another name, don't you?" He looked up, surprised by her interest. "My birth name is Maka, meaning earth." "Maka," Sarah repeated, the name feeling strange yet somehow fitting on her tongue. "Why did they call you Raven instead?" "As a boy, I rescued a young raven with a broken wing," he explained. "I cared for it until it could fly again. My father said I had the raven spirit, clever but sometimes too curious for my own good." Sarah smiled at this glimpse of the boy he had been. "What would have happened to us if the soldiers hadn't come? Would you have kept us captive forever?" Maka was silent for a long moment. "I had begun to see you were not just captives," he admitted. The boy brought laughter back to people who had forgotten joy. "And you," he met her gaze across the fire, "you showed strength without hatred. It made me question many things. I hated you at first," Sarah confessed. "But then I saw how you protected your people, how you honored your traditions even as your world was changing. It's not so different from what I'm trying to do for Thomas. Preserve what matters while finding a way forward." The following day brought them to a swift-flowing river, swollen by recent rains. Maka surveyed it with concern. "We must cross here," he decided. "There is no safe place to ford for many miles." Using fallen logs and Maka's hunting knife, they constructed a crude raft. Sarah watched with growing admiration as he worked, his hands skilled and sure despite his injury. "You've done this before," she observed. "My father taught me," Maka replied. He believed knowledge of the land was our greatest wealth. As they prepared to launch their makeshift craft, the distant sound of voices carried on the wind. Maka tensed, listening intently. "Soldiers," he confirmed grimly. "At least 6, perhaps more." Sarah gathered Thomas close. "What do we do?" Maka made a swift decision. "You and the boy cross now. I will lead them away from your trail." "That's too dangerous," Sarah protested. "They'll kill you if they catch you." "Better one dies than 3, he replied, already checking his weapons. Sarah caught his arm. "Come with us. You don't have to go back to a life of fighting." Conflict played across his features. For a man who had known only war for so long, the possibility of another path seemed to both tempt and terrify him. "My people," he began, "need leaders who can help them find peace," Sarah finished. "You could be that leader, Maka." Before he could respond, Thomas tugged at his buckskin shirt. "Please come with us," the boy pleaded in Crow. "You can teach me to hunt and track like you promised." Something in Maka's expression shifted, a decision crystallizing behind his dark eyes. "Get on the raft," he instructed. "I will join you." They pushed into the current. The raft immediately caught in the river's powerful flow. Maka used a long pole to steer them away from rocks and toward the opposite shore. They were halfway across when shouts echoed from the bank behind them. The soldiers had found them. "Get down!" Maka ordered, positioning himself to shield Sarah and Thomas as rifle shots rang out. The raft lurched violently as a bullet struck the logs near Sarah's feet. Water sprayed up as more shots hit the river around them. Thomas cried out in terror, clinging to his mother. "We're almost there," Sarah encouraged, though the far shore still seemed impossibly distant. Suddenly Maka grunted in pain. Sarah turned to see blood spreading across his shoulder. A bullet had found its mark. Despite the wound, he continued poling, driving them forward with desperate strength. "Maka, you're hit!" Sarah cried, reaching toward him. "Keep the boy down," he gritted through clenched teeth, using his body to block their view from the soldiers. As they neared the far bank, the current grew stronger, threatening to sweep them downstream. With one final, powerful push, Maka drove them toward a small eddy where the water calmed. "Go," he urged as the raft bumped against the shore. "Run for the trees. I will follow." Sarah hesitated, unwilling to leave him, but Thomas's safety had to come first. Gathering the boy in her arms, she splashed through the shallows and up the bank, finding cover among the pines. From their hiding place, Sarah watched anxiously as Maka struggled to follow, his movements growing more labored with each step. He had nearly reached them when more shots rang out from the opposite bank. One struck the ground at his feet, another splintered bark from a tree near his head. Then, with horror, Sarah saw him stagger and fall. "Stay here. Don't move," she instructed Thomas firmly, then darted out from cover. Reaching Maka's side, she found him conscious but badly wounded, blood now soaking his shirt from multiple injuries. "Leave me," he gasped. "They will cross soon." "I'm not leaving you behind," Sarah insisted, pulling his arm across her shoulders. "We survive together or not at all." With strength born of desperation, she helped him to his feet. Together they stumbled toward the forest, each step a battle against pain and exhaustion. Behind them, the soldiers were already preparing to cross the river in pursuit. As they reached the tree line where Thomas waited, Maka looked back at their pursuers, then made a decision that would alter all their fates. "There is a place," he said, his voice weak but determined. "A hidden valley my people consider sacred. Few know of its existence. We might find safety there, if we can reach it in time." Night cloaked the mountains in darkness as Sarah, Thomas, and Maka struggled through dense forest. Every step was a battle, Maka weakening from blood loss, Thomas exhausted beyond his young endurance, and Sarah pushing forward on will alone. They had eluded the soldiers for now, but for how long? "It's not much farther," Maka assured them, though pain lined his face. "The valley lies just beyond the next ridge." Sarah supported him as best she could, alarmed by how heavily he leaned on her. "You need to rest, to let me tend your wounds properly." "There's no time," he insisted. "The soldiers will not give up so easily." Thomas trudged alongside them, his small face drawn with worry. "Is Maka going to die like Papa did?" he whispered to Sarah when Maka had moved ahead to scout the path. Sarah knelt beside her son, cupping his face in her hands. "No, sweetheart. Maka is strong, and we're going to help him. Remember what I told you about Miller's never giving up? Well, I think Maka has a bit of Miller spirit in him, too." This earned a tired smile from Thomas. "He says I'm brave like a crow warrior." "You're the bravest boy I know," Sarah affirmed, hugging him close. When they resumed their journey, Sarah noticed Maka watching them with an expression she couldn't quite read, something between longing and resolve. Near dawn, they crested a rocky outcropping, and Maka gestured for them to look ahead. Below, nestled between towering cliffs, lay a small valley. A clear stream wound through meadows dotted with trees turning gold and crimson with autumn's touch. Steam rose from what appeared to be hot springs near the valley's center. "The healing waters," Maka explained. "My people believe the Great Spirit blessed this place. The waters can mend body and spirit." They made their way down a nearly invisible trail, arriving at the valley floor as the first light of dawn painted the eastern sky. Maka led them to a small cave near the springs, its entrance concealed by hanging vines. "My father brought me here as a boy," he said, his voice growing fainter. "No one will find us." His words trailed off as he collapsed, consciousness finally surrendering to his wounds. "Maka!" Sarah cried, rushing to his side. Together, she and Thomas managed to get him into the cave. By firelight, Sarah carefully removed his bloodied shirt to reveal the full extent of his injuries, 2 bullet wounds, one to his shoulder and another that had grazed his side. "Thomas, fill the water skin from the springs," Sarah instructed. "Hurry now." While Thomas was gone, Sarah tore strips from her petticoat to use as bandages. She had helped the wagon train's doctor enough times to know the basics of wound care, but Maka's injuries were severe. Without proper medicine, infection would be almost certain. Thomas returned with the steaming water, his eyes wide. "It smells funny, Mama. That's the minerals in it," Sarah explained, remembering stories of healing hot springs. They might help Maka get better. For 3 days, Maka drifted between consciousness and fevered delirium. Sarah bathed his wounds with the spring water, made poultices from plants he had identified earlier as medicinal, and coaxed broth into him when he could swallow. Thomas remained constantly at his side, telling stories in a mixture of English and Crow to keep Maka's spirit from wandering too far. On the fourth morning, Sarah woke to find Thomas gone from the cave. Panic seized her until she spotted him sitting outside with Maka, who was propped against a sun-warmed rock, looking pale but alert. "You should be resting," she scolded, though relief softened her words. "The boy was teaching me about trains," Maka replied, his voice weak but clear. "Iron horses that are faster than the swiftest Mustang." Thomas beamed. "Maka's going to ride one with us when we go to Oregon." Sarah met Maka's eyes over Thomas's head, surprised by this development. "Is that so?" "We were discussing possibilities," Maka clarified carefully. "The boy has grand plans." As Maka regained strength, they settled into an unexpected harmony. Sarah foraged for late berries and edible roots that Maka identified. Thomas learned to fish in the stream using techniques Maka taught him. In the evenings, they shared stories around the fire, Sarah of her life in Pennsylvania before heading west, Maka of Crow legends and history. "My husband James would have liked you," Sarah remarked one night, surprising herself with the admission. "He believed different peoples could learn from each other, that the future didn't have to be built on conflict." "A wise man," Maka acknowledged. "I wish I could have known him." "Me too," Thomas chimed in sleepily from his bed of pine boughs. "But I'm glad we have Maka now." His innocent words hung in the air between the adults, acknowledging what had gradually been growing. They had become something like a family in this hidden valley, bound by shared survival and emerging trust. 2 weeks passed, autumn deepening around them. Maka's wounds healed remarkably well, perhaps testament to the spring's reputed properties. Yet with his recovery came the inevitable question of what would happen next. "Winter comes soon to the mountains," Maka observed one morning as they watched frost melt from the meadow grass. "We cannot stay here much longer." "Where will you go?" Sarah asked, dreading the answer. "Back to what remains of your tribe?" Maka was quiet for a long moment. "My path is unclear. The Crow who survived will join other bands, move north perhaps, but I have walked too long between two worlds to fully belong in either." "You could come with us," Sarah suggested, her heart beating faster at her own boldness. "To Oregon. Thomas would be heartbroken to lose you now." "Only Thomas?" Maka asked quietly, his dark eyes searching hers. Sarah felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I would miss you as well, more than I thought possible when we first met." Maka reached out, tentatively taking her hand in his. "When I took you captive, I thought only of revenge. Now I think of sunrise and wonder if I will see it reflect in your eyes." Before Sarah could respond, Thomas's shout broke the moment. "Mama! Maka! Someone's coming!" They turned to see smoke rising from beyond the ridge. A campfire, and close. The soldiers had found them after all. "How?" Sarah gasped. "You said no one knew of this place." "Few, not none," Maka corrected grimly, already gathering their few possessions. "We must leave immediately." "But your wounds," Sarah protested. "Have healed enough," he insisted. "There is another way out of the valley to the west. If we move quickly, we might reach the trading post before they catch our trail." They fled through a narrow canyon, climbing steadily higher into the mountains. By midday, they had gained enough distance that Maka deemed it safe to rest briefly. Thomas had been remarkably stoic, but now exhaustion caught up with him. "I can't walk anymore, Mama," he admitted, tears welling in his eyes. Maka knelt before the boy. "Then I will carry you, little warrior. Your legs may tire, but your spirit remains strong." He hoisted Thomas onto his back, ignoring the strain on his still healing wounds. Sarah wanted to object, but recognized the determination in Maka's eyes. He would protect them at any cost. As dusk approached, they caught sight of the trading post in the valley below, a collection of rough buildings with smoke rising from several chimneys. Safety seemed tantalizingly close. Then the crack of a rifle shot echoed through the trees behind them. "Run!" Maka urged, pushing Sarah ahead. "Get Thomas to the post." "Not without you," Sarah refused, grabbing his arm. More shots rang out, closer now. Maka made a swift decision, lifting Thomas from his back and placing him in Sarah's arms. "Listen to me," he said urgently. "Take the boy downhill. Don't stop for anything. I will lead them away and join you when I can." "That's a lie," Sarah challenged, tears streaming down her face. You're sacrificing yourself. Maka cupped her face with one hand. I was dead already before I met you, Sarah Miller, living only for revenge. You and Thomas gave me back my heart. He pressed his forehead to hers briefly. Now go, live. Before she could protest further, he kissed her, swift but tender, then turned and ran uphill, deliberately making noise to draw their pursuers away. Sarah stood frozen until Thomas's frightened whimper broke through her shock. With a last agonized look in the direction Maka had disappeared, she turned and fled downhill toward the trading post. They were halfway there when shots and war cries echoed from the ridge above. Sarah didn't look back, forcing herself forward even as her heart threatened to shatter. At the trading post, they were met with initial suspicion that turned to compassion when their situation was understood. The owner, a gruff but kind-hearted man named Daniels, offered them shelter and sent several armed men to investigate the commotion on the mountainside. Hours passed with no word. Thomas finally succumbed to exhaustion, but Sarah kept vigil by the window, watching the darkness for any sign of movement. Near midnight, the search party returned. Sarah's heart stopped when she saw they carried someone between them, a body wrapped in blankets. Rushing outside, she prepared herself for the worst. But as the men laid their burden down, the blankets shifted to reveal Maka, battered and bloodied but unmistakably alive. Stubborn Indian, Daniels grunted admiringly. Took down 3 soldiers before they even knew what hit them. Rest fled when our boys showed up. Maka's eyes fluttered open, finding Sarah's face above him. You're safe, he breathed, relief evident despite his pain. We both are, she assured him, taking his hand. And so are you, thanks to these men. In the days that followed, as Maka recovered from his new wounds, decisions were made. The trading post would soon receive a supply wagon bound for Oregon. Daniels, impressed by Maka's courage and Sarah's determination, offered them passage. What about the authorities? Sarah worried. Maka will be seen as an enemy. Way I see it, Daniels drawled. Man who risks his life for a woman and child deserves a fresh start. Besides, plenty of Indians working as scouts and guides out west these days. Man with his skills won't lack for honest work. On the morning of their departure, as they prepared to board the wagon, Sarah found Maka standing alone, gazing at the mountains that had been his home. Having second thoughts? She asked softly. Remembering, he corrected, and letting go. Sarah slipped her hand into his. Thomas asked if he should call you father now. Surprise and something like wonder crossed Maka's face. What did you tell him? That he should ask you himself, Sarah replied. But first, I needed to ask if you wanted that. Not just to be his father, but to be... She faltered, suddenly uncertain. Maka turned to face her fully. When I was Raven, I took you captive. As Maka, I give you my heart freely, if you will have it. I will, Sarah whispered, rising on tiptoe to kiss him. We've all been captives of the past for too long. It's time to be free. Thomas found them like that, hand in hand, facing toward the west where their future waited. Are we ready to go home now? He asked, taking each of their hands in his. Maka and Sarah exchanged a glance filled with promise. Yes, they answered together. We're going home. As the wagon rolled away from the trading post, Sarah looked back one last time at the mountains where so much had been lost and found. The Crow warrior who had once been her captor now sat beside her, a man transformed by love and sacrifice. Thomas, nestled between them, represented the hope that even in a land torn by conflict, new beginnings were possible. Their journey west would not be easy. They would face prejudice and challenges none of them could yet imagine, but they would face them together, a family forged in adversity, strengthened by compassion, and bound by love that had overcome the most impossible of odds. And that, Sarah realized as she turned her gaze toward the horizon, was the greatest freedom of all.